Alright, I'm back with another video. This one is a little more nebulous. I don't even know what to call it exactly other than why I think the live service bubble is bursting. And, well, you could say this has been happening kind of in slow motion for a while. It feels like it's accelerating lately, and this is, tangentially tied at least to what I was ranting about with Fortnite yesterday. More the epic layoffs, but Fortnite is obviously included in that. I am a live service main. That is how I kind of made my name for myself. Was covering Destiny essentially forever. That is sort of the biggest live service game that exists, at least in terms of things that are also PvE. The definition of live service is kind of anything with ongoing content and seasons and battle passes and things. And now that has also encompassed a whole lot of multiplayer games that are competitive multiplayer. There are vanishingly few live service games that also have a significant PvE element to them. And those are the ones that are dying out the most quickly, but in general, I sort of see the whole industry starting to move away from this idea of these endless games in a way that I feel is similar to the whole MMO genre really tanking, except for the ones that, dominated the space for so long, your World of Warcrafts, and then I would say Final Fantasy is 14 is, the last true MMO that is, big and still functioning and quite good. But we saw so many others, fall away over the years. And now we are kind of in the same situation with live services, or at least we are heading strongly in that direction, where I believe we are going to see both more and more failures than we've already seen, and then also less investments in live service titles soon enough. Maybe not immediately, maybe not in the next year or two, but this feels like a chapter that is going to close to some extent, and I think there's a few reasons why for that. Again, I think some of the old, kings of the genre will remain. This is not like an anti-Destiny thing. I think Destiny's dying. I think Destiny will be one of the ones that is around indefinitely. I think on the multiplayer side, you have your kind of entrenched staples, your Apex Legends and your Call of Duty war zones, even though everyone complains about those in different ways. Those are sort of set in many ways, and it is going to be hard to dethrone them. So we've seen this happen multiple times where on the PvE side, this whole thing is almost dead. No one wants to invest significant content in a game that may have multiplayer, but is also focused on delivering significant PvE content on a regular basis. It is really, really goddamn hard. We can think back to even when Destiny started and the volume of content it was putting out. And, now they have really escalated, and you may think back to, the glory days of Season of the Forge and stuff, but the amount of actual content that has gone into Seasons has really escalated. And the times when that was lesser, when they were doing DLCs with planets and stuff, there were these yawning gaps of nothing to do in between them because they were not actually doing live content in the same way back then. And then they had Activision support studios helping them even make all this. That was an era where we saw a lot of people trying to chase Destiny, and barely anyone got anywhere close. I would say it was The Division. The Division gave it the old college try, and the Division 3 is coming at some point. We will see what sort of live ambitions it has then. And then Warframe. Warframe is always a solid performer. Maybe not, the same tier as Destiny or these other AAA ones to the same extent, but, it's there. The biggest disasters we saw were things like Anthem, things like Marvel's Avengers, things like Godfall, which was trying to be a looter. Really, really big, high-profile projects that were being chased by major studios. An Avengers game by Crystal Dynamics, who had, done the really highly praised new Tomb Raider trilogy. Anthem, done by BioWare, where they had, decided to do that instead of doing their next Mass Effect game. I guess we could even include Battleborn in that, as that had a decently significant PvE component in addition to its MOBA-ish stuff. That was Gearbox doing that instead of Borderlands stuff. All of these tanked hard. And what is everyone doing? What are all of those studios doing now? Crystal Dynamics is making another Tomb Raider. Anthem is, or BioWare is making another Mass Effect. And Gearbox is making another Borderlands. These did not pan out for almost anyone. So instead what we have is a game like Destiny, and I would say the biggest current equivalent to Destiny is Genshin Impact. Genshin Impact delivers PvE content on a scale that I don't know how they do it. It is vast. They add enormous new regions to the map all of the time, all these new characters and character kits. And, you know, I get where their funding comes from, their gacha model, but it is very impressive how much they make. And I'd say those are kind of the only two getting close here. And then everything else is sort of a sea of, someone's calling me, sea of multiplayer things that even Bungie is kind of transitioning into now, where we're seeing Marathon, we're seeing this other game, and I would be amazed if 2 or 3 or 4 or any of the future incubated games they're making will have a significant PvE content to them because of how difficult that is to do. And in terms of other games that are now struggling with that are really trying to capture something that was fleeting for a couple years there is, you know, the new Diablo 4 seasonal model has really struggled. Granted, it's only season 1, but it does not seem like they know how to sort of keep up with the times in terms of distributing rewards, encouraging, you know, persistent gameplay. And, you know, they're trying to lean on all these seasons of Diablo 3, but it isn't really working yet in the modern era. Granted, it's early and we'll see where things go. But that's something I've noticed recently with what should be, you know, a big new live service game and is not really performing that well at all. We are also, you know, I think we've seen the peak of a lot of these games, like Fortnite. The Battle Royale portion of Fortnite clearly peaked, you know, a couple years ago. Call of Duty, even with all the Warzone stuff, the new things, like, is... I would think that most people wouldn't agree that it is not what it once was. Everyone has their own opinions about Valorant and, like, Overwatch as a live game, adding new characters and things, and transitioning to a battle pass because they felt like they had to in the live service era. Overwatch 2, not amazing either. So it's going to be tough for something like Marathon to break into the live service space unless it is just way, way, way more compelling than anything else. The main problem here, the main problem with all of this is time. And this was also the MMO problem, where MMOs require not just a huge time investment, more than most live service games. If you were really grinding, they had a cost too. The same thing is going on with live service games, where it is a tremendous time commitment for a lot of these, especially depending on what you are trying to do and trying to keep up with. Something like Genshin Impact, even keeping up with just the story content and solving the new puzzles in the region is a lot. Most of these games, the goal is to get through the battle pass you paid for, which is usually 100 ranks or something like that, which, depending on the game, can take a whole lot of grinding. And then in kind of loot-based games, you are grinding for the chance it drops. For multiplayer games, you're grinding to, depending on the game, level up gear or, you know, hit new milestones for your character and things like that. It is a significant amount of time. So you run into the MMO problem where you have all of these battle passes running, all of these objectives to compete across all of these live games, and there's no time. There's no time for everyone to do everything all at once. And I have personally, you know, realized this myself, where at my peak, I was juggling like 3 live service games at a time, with Destiny kind of always being the constant. And it became too much. Trying to do Genshin Impact and Destiny at the same time was nuts. Like, there was just not remotely enough time for that. And, like, forget trying to grind through, you know, the Call of Duty Battle Pass or the Apex Legends, you know, drops or something. Like, it's not possible. So you pick and choose what you have time for. And people who do not play video games for a living, like me, are really, really restricted in which live games they want to actually sink time into. So, well, you do have an ongoing revenue model with a live service game, you are competing against, you know, time sinks from not even just video games and other live service games. You're competing against time sinks from Netflix binging and, you know, other, you know, people playing phone games and things like that, because it is so much time. And this is why I think, despite, all this talk about gaming evolving and blah, 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 and, huge budgets for games that are unsustainable and all of these things, there is a reason that we have never fully broken away from, like, the independent standalone game that might have, like, an expansion later, but is not necessarily, a live service adding things. And how many games do I need to name this year that are that exact type of format? It may be long, you may be putting 50, 60, 100 hours in, but generally speaking, unless you're doing replays, unless you're doing some crazy achievement hunt, there's an end to these games. You put your time in, you beat them in 2 weeks, a month, 2 months, whatever, and you're done. There is no ongoing content to keep up with. You have beaten Tears of the Kingdom. You have beaten Baldur's Gate 3, Armored Core, Starfield even. Like, we'll see what they add to that over time. Spider-Man 2, like, I got a review copy of Spider-Man 2. I haven't even played it yet, but we've heard ahead of time that game is, like, as long as the first game, so 20, 25 hours. That sounds great to me. I love that. That is amazing. And the reason we keep coming back to this is because people can play these games and commit to them for a set period of time and go away. Live service games, you feel like forced to play if you have purchased the Battle Pass, and if you don't, in a lot of these games, especially the PvE ones, you felt like you would fall behind to the point where you can't catch up. Destiny still feels like that to a lot of a greater extent than most, and that has been a problem that they haven't really addressed super well. And it's gotten to the point now where people are just actively anti-live service. Like, before, people were like, yeah, Destiny's cool. Like, what if we got another cool game like Destiny? And people were trying them out. And, people were like, oh, well, battle passes are better than loot boxes. And which maybe they were. But I think you could look at something like Overwatch, and I think its loot boxes were actually better than the battle pass system or the new character acquisition system. But that's a debate for another day. But now you're seeing people be actively rooting for games not to be live service. And sometimes these games that even promise live service stuff can't deliver on them. Redfall was supposed to deliver ongoing content and more characters and more missions. Don't think that's going to happen, because if your initial game fails, all the live service plans you had going, even if you already sunk costs into them, you're screwed, because you need the base thing to take off before that. We're seeing this in other ways for games that aren't out yet, like Suicide Squad, the Rocksteady Suicide Squad game, where everyone's like, oh cool, another Rocksteady game of superheroes, and then they showed it, and it's a looter. And not only is it a looter, they're talking about an ongoing storyline and new heroes added and new loot and new missions and stuff, and then you just get it's just Avengers again. And that did not go well. So, like, that was hammered when they debuted the live service elements of that game, because it was a break from the traditional Rocksteady, Arkham games, which, again, 20-hour, 30-hour, 40-hour game, you're done with it. You move on. And no one wanted a live service Suicide Squad game. And I fundamentally believe they only even picked Suicide Squad in the first place so it could be multiplayer and it could have loot. And both of those things could contribute to a live service game, because Suicide Squad uses guns and weapons and stuff where, like, Superman doesn't. So I think that's one of the reasons that game was conceived of in the first place. This, I just think, is where the industry is trending. I think a lot of the biggest live games have peaked or are about to peak, and we have seen almost the complete evaporation of PvE-based live games or live games with a significant PvE component, because no one could do it outside of, like, 1, 2, 3 examples. And the ones that are still trying to do it are struggling hard. Multiplayer is another thing. It's a little hard for me to imagine competitive multiplayer games just ditching seasons entirely, but I do believe a lot of those have already peaked, and maybe they'll be replaced by the exact same thing with battle passes, or maybe we turn a corner and this entire model shifts to something else. And I know everyone is in pursuit of ongoing revenue and this and that, which may work out a lot of the time, and yet the more of these games surface, the harder it becomes to justify playing more than one. So it is a competitive landscape the way traditional games are not, because all you do with traditional games is make a good game, release it at a time when there are not a bunch of other good games coming out, which has been very hard this year, admittedly, and like success, and maybe you sell some DLC, some expansions, whatever. But that doesn't really exist anymore, and now everyone wants to chase the live thing. And there's been this push and pull of like what you can sell with microtransactions, and that was the big thing. And then everyone got mad about that, and so a lot of games scaled that back, and then we're like, okay, we're going to do battle passes. But now most games have just done everything. There's a cash shop, there's a battle pass. Good old Counter-Strike has its endless crate opening when everyone hated loot boxes, and yet somehow that's the most exciting thing on streaming now. But it feels like we are headed toward the complete saturation of the space. And in a way, we've probably already arrived there a year or two ago, but now we're really seeing it start to kick in. And the other day there was an announcement of Sega canceling a live service game, and we've seen so many of these fail. I will be very curious to see how Suicide Squad returns, because it got pushed back. They say it's not because of the live service complaints, but we'll see what changes there. We'll see what something like Diablo 4 does as it tries to do a somewhat PvE-based live service thing, but from what I saw from Season 1, it was not terribly substantive content, so they are struggling with that too. And then just when I said I think the live service bubble was bursting on Twitter, everyone was like, hooray, hooray, hooray. And, I guess Twitter sentiment is one thing, but we won't really know if this happens unless spending goes down, unless we see more and more of these projects shrink and disappear. And I don't know what replaces it. I really don't. Like, Microsoft seems to think it's like Game Pass stuff where everyone will just subscribe to a service, and then you get Microsoft to pay you money to put your game on the service. Maybe you sell some extra things on top of that, so you and Microsoft make more money, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the games you put on a service like that are live or ongoing, and maybe there's more flexibility there. I don't know if I buy that. I certainly don't think Sony's doing that anytime soon, but Sony in particular, I am very curious to see. They have had smash hit after smash hit with their first party releases, but now they want to get into the live service game, and they're having Bungie teach everyone how to do live service things, and they're making 10 live service games, and I don't know, man. I don't think that's going to go so well, personally. Like, Marathon, sure, great. But we're already seeing cracks start to form there. There's a report that Bungie saw the Last of Us Factions game and did not think it was very good or ready for prime time, and that is one of the most high-profile live games they're making right now. So, I don't know. There's just a lot of bad smoke in the wind. I don't know. It's a terrible analogy, but it feels like something's coming for live service games based on sentiment toward it, based on how hard it is to make these, make them compelling, and make them sustained, and make them competitive against a very saturated market that is kind of occupied by a few giants that are probably kind of fixed in there. I said MMOs, and I think we also did this with MOBAs and Battle Royales too, where those are live to a certain extent, but that was a very specific genre that everyone tried to get into, then everyone bailed out, and there was like 2 left. So that's happened everywhere else, and I think that's probably going to happen with the different variants of live service games too. So that is what I think when I say the live service bubble is bursting. I don't think it happens all at once. I think it has already started, and then I think it's just kind of accelerating now, and it won't ever fully die, because as I said, some of these games from these big genres that are no longer getting investment still carry over. Sometimes the genre dies almost completely, like RTS games. But I'm very curious to see what's going to happen here in the next couple of years, and whether market saturation will scale this back, and what fun money-making venture these companies will figure out next if they can't get everyone to pay for quarterly battle passes anymore, if they have to move on to something else. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.